Well, good morning, everyone. So I'm really excited to be here this morning. I have been anticipating telling you about the trip that I took last year in October, November to India. And I wanted to share with you some of my experiences, maybe some of the insights that I gained from that experience, and just tell you how impactful it has been in my life. And I'm really excited to be able to share it with you today. What I won't do is what I did at Vista last month when I talked about this trip, and I spoke for an hour. And I realized at the end, I can't do that. And so my husband said, okay, cut it by 2/3. So I know Dharma School has to get out, and we've got adult study, so this is more of the edited version of that talk that I did last month. So first of all, I want to talk about who this or what this was all about. I learned about this trip from my friend Lila Grant, who went to a yoga retreat with this man, Bob Matsueda, who is a yoga and wellness instructor, and he is also the facilities director at the Jodo Shinshu Center. He is a certified yoga therapist through the government of India. He's one of very few in the United States who actually has that kind of certification. And he is actually working very closely with the BCA to develop a Buddhist yoga certification program, because we're finding that this would be a wonderful way to connect yoga and Buddhism in the United States, because there's so many people that practice yoga, and there is a really close connection between both Buddhism and yoga. So he's trying to develop that program, and our own Reverend John and Linda Turner are involved in that pilot program. So they're developing, and so stay tuned to hear more about this. Anyway, Bob developed this trip called Bob's Heart of India Spiritual Seekers Tour. He went to India the year before and did southern India, but this trip was mostly geared for northern India. And so a year before, I decided, okay, I'm going to do this. It required monthly Zoom meetings to be oriented and try to kind of work our way through the bureaucracy of India, which is insane. It is the most frustrating thing I have ever experienced. Both Tom and I were constantly running up against things that weren't working, and Bob kept saying, just be patient. This is India. It's not Japan. It's totally different. You have to have a different mindset. So we finally did get through all of that. So here's the group I went with, mostly retired, mostly Japanese American, mostly BCA affiliated. I didn't know anybody on the trip except for Bob. I kind of knew him because we worked together last year to do a yoga session here at OCBC that was very highly successful. But other than that, I didn't know anybody. So I kind of went blind, but I figured, we kind of got to know each other a little bit through our monthly Zoom meetings, but it wasn't until we were actually on the ground in India together that we got to really know each other. Wonderful group of people, really interesting backgrounds, and for 3 weeks we were together, very close and personal, and I have to say I liked everybody. So I'm going to run through, here's a map to kind of let you know, this is northern India. And so all those little stars are places that we went, and we're going to kind of start in the middle section of stars. I'm going to run through that very quickly. Since I told you I'm not going to do what I did at Vista, I'm going to run through the parts that are not Buddhist in the beginning, because I encountered actually 5 religions while I was there. India is kind of the birthing ground of lots of religions. So I encountered Hindu, Sikh, Islam, Christianity, surprisingly, and of course Buddhism. So I'm going to run through real quickly some of the non-Buddhist things that I encountered. And they include, and so this is where we kind of ended up first. We flew into Delhi, and so the first part of our trip was in this little quadrant of 4 stars. And this includes Agra, Jaipur, and then the Ranthambore National Tiger Reserve. So I'm going to run through this really quickly. Taj Mahal, everybody has to go see the Taj Mahal if they go to India. I know it's kind of a cliche, but it was magnificent. The pictures don't do it justice. It is fantastic. And if anyone ever gets a chance to go to India, you have got to see it. We unfortunately went on one of the busiest days ever there, and it took us forever to get through lines, and security in India is insane. Insane. I won't go into more details. I can talk about this during adult study, but it was crazy. But highly impressive, wonderful experience. I would recommend doing that. So this is in Agra, and what we also did in Agra at the same time is we went to see a Mother Teresa shelter home. So she has developed, or through her, there's a new order of nuns. She's Catholic, as many of you know, and there is the Missionaries of Charity, and it is a whole organization of shelters, and it's a worldwide organization now. And so we went to one of the shelters in Agra. It was a home for destitute women and handicapped children. So very moving, very impactful. You know, her work has been magnificent. And so we all made a donation while we were there, but it was really impressive, the kind of dedication that you see in a place like that. We also went on an elephant ride up to a temple. We went to the city of Jaipur to see a fort called Amber Fort. And so one of the things Bob had promised his group the year before was an elephant ride, and they couldn't do it. So there were 8 people who had gone on the year before's India trip, so he wanted to make sure we got an elephant ride this time. So we rode up to Amber Fort on an elephant, and I'm sitting with Bob. And the elephant ride was fine, but the hawkers and the people trying to sell you souvenirs was insane. They would just not stop. So you had to just try to be very, stoic, ignore them. They kept coming up to you, but it was impossible to ignore them. Anyway, the elephant ride was fun. Although they wanted you to pay them if you took a picture with the elephants. So they were, this is a poor country. They're all trying to get by and make as much money as they can. And of course, tourists are targets for all of this. So you have to just understand that that's the situation. So we also went to the Ranthambore Tiger Preserve, and I was really excited. We were going to go maybe see some tigers. We got there, and it rained the whole time we were there. We were in open-air Jeeps, and we were in the rain for 2.5 hours just going down muddy trails, and we never saw a tiger. So this is my only picture of what I hoped to see, but it was not to be. We did see other things. Some people saw a bear. We saw a lot of deer-like, creatures. We saw peacocks. We saw, I think, some monkeys, but no tigers. And it was really cold and wet. So then we went to a place called Amritsar. We drove, and that was a long drive on the bus, and we ended up going to see something called the Golden Temple. This is a Sikh temple. So Sikh is a separate religion from Hindu. The man that you see in the front wearing the turban, very characteristic of what Sikh men wear. I think they have very long hair, and they kind of wrap it up in their turbans. And so this is a very typical looking Sikh person. So we went to visit, and everybody had to have their head covered and their feet uncovered. So we had to take off our shoes, and we had to walk through like a little puddle of water to kind of cleanse our feet. And then for the entire grounds of the temple, which included this giant lake that surrounded the Golden Temple, we walked around barefooted. But the thing that is so characteristic of the Sikh religion is that they feed people. And one of Tom, my husband's friend, plays pickleball with a Sikh man, and he talked to him about the Sikh religion, and he said that it's typical that at all Sikh temples that they feed people. So the Golden Temple is famous for feeding people, and you won't believe how many they feed. So this is a typical kind of meal. It's vegetarian. They serve at the Golden Temple 40 to 100,000 meals a day. Unbelievable production. We saw the kitchens, we saw them stirring rice and making, I guess it's not a chapati, but well, maybe that is. It's a, kind of a pancake thing. There's lentils and chickpea, and then that kind of yellow blob is sweet potato. It actually was very delicious, and we had our lunch there, but so impressive that they could feed that many people. And I think they just are open 24/7, and you can go there and eat if you want to, and we did. So it was an amazing experience. Okay, so then next we went to, I'm going to take us to Varanasi. So this is Hindu, and we were able to go to what was called the Diwali Festival of Lights. It's an annual event where people of Hindu religion come to Varanasi, and it's right on the Ganges River. So this is a picture of the Ganges River. I would say several 100,000 people will go to this festival, and it's really valuable or important for Hindu people to bathe in the Ganges. It's a way for them to cleanse their whatever they need cleansing. I mean, their bad habits or their bad karma or whatever, but it's a ritual for them to go to the Ganges and bathe. So we saw lots of people bathing. We went on a boat ride at dawn to watch the sunrise. And then later in the day, we came back in the evening to watch the Festival of Lights. We also witnessed a cremation along the banks. So apparently in Hindu religion, our guide was a man by the name of Rahul Kant, and he was Hindu. He said that when a person dies in India, and if they're Hindu, I don't know about the other religions, they need to be cremated that same day. So it doesn't matter whether it's in the middle of the Diwali festival or at any time, they get brought to one of the cremation sites, and apparently there are several along the Ganges. And we actually saw a cremation, and they pile wood, and then they put the body there, and you watch the cremation as it happens, and that was a very moving experience. We also did an offering into the Ganges. They had these little bowls with a candle and flowers, and so Rahul had each of us carry our candle and bowl to the river, and he said just make a wish and give an offering to the Ganges. So we were able to do that. I have pictures of it, but I don't want to show you everything that I did because we'd be here for an hour. So. Okay, and here's another picture. Here you can see a little bit better people actually bathing. Oh yeah, here's my flower offering. Yeah, we're at the banks and we're just letting our little offering go, but so many people. And then I'm going to just show you one picture of the Festival of Lights, and it was spectacular. We were in a boat going up and down the river, all these lights and music and sound and boats everywhere and people, and it was just an amazing experience. So this was something that happens every year. So if you want to go to India, I would suggest going to see the Diwali festival. Okay, so this is the first part of my talk. Next, I want to focus on the Buddhist parts. So the next two things I will be talking about have to do more with the Buddhism, which is mostly what I was there to see. I really enjoyed experiencing the other religions. Of course, it's just a snapshot view of them. But what I did take away is that it's a deeply religious country. People are very in tune with their religious traditions, and it's an ancient culture, and so it's steeped all the way down to the bones of all the people. And whether you're Sikh or Hindu or Muslim or Buddhist or whatever, it's very much a part of their culture. So for me, Bob wanted also for this to be very Buddhist focused. So what we did on the last part of our trip was we went to many of the Buddhist sites that the historical Buddha actually followed. And so for me, we've been hearing the stories of the Buddha's journey, his life, our whole lives, I think, as members of OCBC or members of Shin Buddhism. So being able to actually visit them was, for me, very impactful and very meaningful. I want to mention that I have also been reading this book, Old Path, White Clouds, that was recommended to me by Judy Nakatomi at the Vista Temple. She's one of the MAs there. She and her husband, Ricky Schlesinger, went with Bob the year before to the southern India trip. And she told me that I should read this book, which I haven't done until now, but it is a book written by Thich Nhat Hanh, who is probably the second most famous Buddhist in the world. And it is a narrative, I guess it'd be like a historical novel, where he has written a story about the Buddha's life. And in this book, you actually have the Buddha talking to his parents and to his aunt and to his wife and to all his servants. And you get a real sense of him as a person. And for me, I'm listening to it on audiobook, it's really brought to life the Buddha as a human being and what he must have been like. Of course, it's based on true events. It's based on what we know of the Buddha. And so what Thich Nhat Hanh has done is that he has sort of used his own imagination to develop a story that has a very compelling feel to it. Like this feels very real. And so being able to listen to this book and learn about the Buddha and how he might have been as a human being has been very meaningful for me. And I would highly recommend this book to anyone who is interested in maybe getting a better sense of the Buddha as a person. So I'm going to take you through, not in chronological order of what I encountered, but in chronological order of his life. So as you know, he left when he was 29, and for 6 years he wandered around and became a monk, an ascetic, and was trying to find the way. So towards the end of his 6 years, he ended up going to this mountain and meditated in a cave. And so this is our approach to the mountain, and it kind of has a steep incline up to it. And so at the bottom of this mountain, there are litters people that'll carry you up to this cave if you can't do it on your own. So we had several people that needed some help, and these very strong young men had these litters that they would carry people up to the cave. And then there were lots of monkeys that we encountered too on the way. So inside the cave, you can see the entrance to this cave is very low, and it's called the Praj Bodhi Cave. And this is where the Buddha spent about 6 months in a very severe ascetic practice, where he was barely eating And he thought he needed to do this kind of practice to reach awakening, because that's what he was searching for all these 6 years, was how to attain enlightenment, how to find the way. And so in the cave, there is this statue that you can see that kind of depicts the Buddha as he might have been at that time. Very emaciated, his ribs are showing, and it's not a very big cave. You know, you can stand up in it, but it probably is no more than 10 feet wide and maybe about the same long, but just a small room, dark cave with a very small opening. I first went in there with I was lined up and went in with a bunch of people, but then I came back later while everyone was out, kind of doing other things in the area, and I went in and with just one other person from our group, and it was such a serene and impactful experience being there in this quiet cave and thinking about the Buddha being there and meditating for that time, trying to find a way to solve human suffering. And so you kind of felt that his presence was almost there, and that was very meaningful. Next, this is something called Sujata Stupa. We actually didn't go there. We kind of ran out of time. But this is down by the river. If you recall the Buddha's story, he got to the point where he decided this ascetic practice is not working. So he walks to the river, and he's there and kind of collapses, and he sits underneath what they say is a banyan tree. Apparently this was a kind of a famous tree along this river, and this is the point where this young girl, Sujata, in the story, in Thich Nhat Hanh's story, she's 13, and she's coming to make an offering to the forest gods, and she runs across Siddhartha, kind of collapsed there under this banyan tree, and she gives him some milk and porridge, and it revives him. And in the Thich Nhat Hanh story, she helps him to gain his strength, and he washes in the river, and then he decides that asceticism is not the way to enlightenment. And so in this story, she becomes an important part of his search for another way. And what we all know is that he ends up finding a Bodhi tree and in the forest, and sits under that and comes to his awakening. So the spot where he is supposed to have done this is in Bodh Gaya, and here is a temple that was built on the spot where he attained his awakening and enlightenment. And then there is a Bodhi tree there. This Bodhi tree is not the original Bodhi tree, but it is from the same source as the original Bodhi tree. This is like the third Bodhi tree, we're talking about 2,000, almost 600 years ago that the Buddha had his enlightenment experience. And so this tree actually comes from the same source. When Ashoka, who was one of the emperors of India, he embraced Buddhism, he sent branches of the Bodhi tree to Sri Lanka. And so this tree was kind of propagated also in Sri Lanka. So when the original Bodhi tree died in India, they brought back some of the saplings from the Bodhi tree in Sri Lanka. So this is the third generation of that tree. And you may or may not know the story that when Ricky Schlesinger was in India 2 years ago with Bob Matsueda, he picked up seeds from under this tree, kind of snuck them because it's illegal to do that. And he brought back like 30 seeds, and he gave some to the Huntington Library, and then he also had a nursery propagate them. And so we have some of these trees here in Southern California. When Reverend Corey Kwan came, he brought 3 of those trees. And he gave one to one of our temple members. I think it was, Janet Sakahara's granddaughter. Was it Kayla or Kenna? One of the girls received the tree. And I'm going to get one too because I talked to him already about it. So I'm really excited because I'm doing a new garden. So anyway, so this tree is ancient, and we actually spent time meditating here. We all stayed and sat, found a place to sit, and we also meditated under this tree, and it was also very impactful. Okay, so next, when we were in Varanasi, there's a place called Sarnath. And this place is famous, and this is the Sarnath Stupa. It's just basically a brick structure. I don't know if there's anything inside, but this is where the Buddha came to give his first sermon. This is where he talked about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And so this place is also really famous for that being a historic site. And there's a museum and a temple also here, but this is the place where he gives his very first sermon. Okay. All right, next, I'm going to talk about the trip to Dharamsala. So that was kind of in the middle. When we were at Amritsar, which is where I saw the Golden Temple, it was at that point that we had to transfer from a big luxury bus to cars, because the road to Dharamsala from Amritsar is 152 miles of rough road. It required cars that were narrow enough to handle gridlock streets and animals. We saw lots of cows and dogs and goats. And it had a lot of the time the road was unpaved and potholed, and sometimes we were bouncing around back and forth, and it was dusty. And then as we were climbing up towards the Himalayas, you see Dharamsala is very close to Tibet, which is kind of in the foothills of the Himalayas. So we're climbing, and the roads get very narrow. So we had to be in cars at that point. So the road to Dharamsala was an adventure in itself. But here's a view of the mountains from our hotel room. It was magnificent. And these aren't even the real Himalayas. These are kind of a sub range of mountains, but they were still very impressive nonetheless. So the Dalai Lama is in Dharamsala, and I have some information about that. So this is his home, and there's a temple called Tsugla Kang Buddhist Temple, and it's located in a part of Dharamsala that overlooks the Kangra Valley in a densely populated area called MacLeod Ganj. I'm not sure what Ganj means, but MacLeod is kind of an English name. So the outer portions of the temple are easily accessible, but being allowed into the inner sanctum of the temple to have an audience with His Holiness the Dalai Lama took about a year of preparation. So through Bob and through Rahul, they were able to get us an audience with the Dalai Lama. Part of it required a letter from Bob where he explained that, where he kind of analogized our situation of the Issei coming to America as pioneers, very similar to the diaspora of Tibetans who fled, particularly in 1959 when the Chinese invaded Tibet, and the Dalai Lama at that point fled. So Tibetans are in exile, and there's a diaspora of about 150,000 Tibetans who fled the Chinese, and they are led by the Dalai Lama. The primary goal of the Tibetan government in exile is to safeguard Tibetan culture, religion, and language, and to provide an education for Tibetan children, and to maintain the Tibetan identity as it exists in exile, while advocating for the freedom in Tibet. So the Tibet situation, there are still maybe 3.5 million people still in Tibet. I think worldwide there's something like 5.5, 6 million Tibetans in the world, but the situation in Tibet, is quite oppressive because of the Chinese government. And so the Dalai Lama has been in exile, a government exile since 1959. One thing that I probably need to clarify too, a lot of people think that the Dalai Lama is like the Buddhist Pope, somebody that everybody believes in or follows. And in reality, the impact of the Dalai Lama on other Buddhist traditions is relatively small. He's the leader of this one form of Tibetan Buddhism, but what is so compelling about his situation is the fact that he is in exile, he had to flee, and the fact that they are sort of an oppressed people in their country makes for an extremely compelling story for the world. And so that's why he has gotten a lot of notoriety and attention. But the fact is that his, I wanted to show a little bit more of, this is McLeod Ganj. As you can see, it's kind of a very crowded and in commercial area, but you'll see monks just walking around like that. And this is the temple that the Dalai Lama lives in. It's both a monastery and a temple. So anyway, getting back to the Dalai Lama, he is the most recognizable Buddhist in the world and has been a tremendous spokesman for all Buddhists. And global efforts, he has been tremendous in promoting global efforts towards kindness, peace, love, and mindfulness. And he's been one that has really propelled Buddhism into the forefront of modern culture and spirituality. So I also saw the Dalai Lama. Many of you have probably seen him when he's come to visit in the United States. I went maybe 15 years ago when he was at UCI in a big arena there at the Bren Center. I also saw him at the Long Beach Convention Center. And going to see him, if you also experienced that, was going to see like a rock star. Huge crowds, all this excitement, traffic, and it was a big event. And I recall that he was so charming, affable, genuine, and you could just feel kind of the kindness that comes out of him. And so his warmth and genuineness really is, you're able to feel that, and his compassion and authenticity was undeniable. So I think he is a truly a wonderful spokesman for Buddhism, but like I said, as far as his impact on other Buddhist traditions in general, is somewhat limited. So there's him when he was a little bit younger. So then I'm going to talk about the day of the audience when we actually went as a group to see him. So someone suggested that I take my robes, and I did. And so I wore them that day, these robes, and there were very strict protocols. Every place in India, particularly if you're going to historic sites, they don't want you to take cell phones, even electronic watches we had to take off. There were no bags, you can't have anything in your pockets, and so you kind of just go in bare. So we couldn't take any pictures once we went into the temple. So we were lined up, and we put in some chairs, and then we were led to a courtyard, an open courtyard that was shaded, and there was a porch, and we were kind of all lined up, single file. There were probably 75 of us all together. In my group, there was a total of 24 of us, so we were part of this larger group, all waiting around this courtyard, and the Dalai Lama gets brought out in a golf cart, and he's there with his other attendants, and he's carefully placed on the kind of a raised porch in the shade. And he looks very frail. He's 90 now, and even before we went, they kept saying, well, you have an audience scheduled, but it all depends on his health. And so fortunately for us, he was well enough to come out that day. And apparently he does this when he's healthy, twice a day, 6 days a week, where he'll have an audience with all of these groups of people that want to come see him. So we were filing by him one by one, and we were kind of in the middle of the group. So it took a little while for us to get to him. But he really spent time with every person that was in front of him. He gave outstretched hands. Sometimes he touched a person's cheek. And all the while, he would gaze very deeply into your eyes and smile. I never saw him speak. Before, when I saw him like 15 years ago, he was very animated, very talkative, very affable. But he's really not speaking now. So each member of our group approached, and we were all wearing this white scarf, which we received when we got to our hotel. And this is a traditional Tibetan scarf, and that signifies welcome and purity. So I had my okesa on, I had this white scarf on, and then finally my turn came, and I stood before him, and I felt the magnitude of his gentle demeanor. He was so real. And many of us, were crying when we got to him because it was such a moving moment. So he held my hands, he did touch my cheek, and he really looked deeply into my eyes, and I thought, this is such a real human being. So then I took off my okesa, I did it like this, and I folded it, and I said, I would like to present this okesa to His Holiness. And he must have understood, because I don't know, if he was being interpreted at that point. He grabs my okesa and wraps it around his head and shoulders, and he looks so happy to have it on. And in that moment, I didn't feel like I could touch him to straighten it out. It was kind of, well, here it is. It's sort of draped over him, but it's kind of in the right place. But I explained to him, I said that this okesa represents 125 years of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism in America. And it's very meaningful to us, and I would like you to have this. So he took it, and he held my hands, and then I left. So it was, I think in that moment, I felt that we both had this sense of just what it meant to be dedicated to the teachings, and how important it was to spread the teachings. And that is something he has done his whole life. Even from the time he was a young child, he was raised to do that, and that's what he has done wonderfully all these years. So for me, I go back and I think about that experience. I think about all the things that happened over the 3 weeks, and those images and impressions keep coming back to me. Okay, I think I'm okay on time. So I have one last thing to say about the Dalai Lama. So right around the time that I left for India, Reverend John missed his okesa, this same okesa. And I sent him this picture the day that it happened. I sent it to all the ministerial staff, the ministers and minister assistants. Reverend John saw the Dalai Lama wearing this okesa, and he goes, "That's my okesa." And he still hasn't found it. So I swear it's mine. But right now we're missing 2 okesas. So I'm in the middle of moving, and a lot of things are in boxes. I'm just so worried that I'm going to open a box and find an okesa in there. And then we'll know that the Dalai Lama has Reverend John's okesa. So, to be continued. Okay, so I'm going to end with this. What was most special to me, I think it deepened my connection to my Buddhist path. It was meaningful to be there in India where it all began. Visiting the sites of Siddhartha Gautama's journey was indeed special, and like I said, listening to Thich Nhat Hanh's book now really is making that very impactful. Having my encounter with His Holiness, and then being with my fellow travelers. They were some amazing people, and I hope to see them in the future. We have some very important connections because of this shared experience. And I especially like the fact that I was able to experience this country through Rahul and Bob's eyes. This is a country that they deeply love and are committed to. It's not an easy country, and I'll talk about that during adult study. There are so many challenges of being in this country, but it has so much depth, and it was a truly amazing experience. So I think I'm good. So thank you for listening, and please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu.